So we've been playing through the Dot Hack series on stream in preparation for the release of Dot Hack 0, and in our journey, I actually discovered something. We've been playing Dot Hack all wrong. More importantly, you've been playing Dot Hack all wrong. Let's back up a little bit. One of the fundamentally greatest mistakes everyone makes when playing Dot Hack is in the very beginning when they form their party. The formation of the party is usually where our first mistake is drawn. Because I'm here to tell you guys, Wavemasters suck in this game. They're terrible. Now I know most people, including myself in our original playthrough of Dot Hack Infection, play through the standard Kite, Black Rose, Mistral build. And I understand a lot of people do that specifically because those are the first 3 party members you normally gain in your original playthroughs. So naturally you would want to keep them by your side, you give them gear first, they become the strongest, and by the end of the game they're the 3 you rely on. However, that is a major mistake, especially towards the later games of Outbreak and Quarantine. That is where the mistake truly shines and you really start to feel it in your gameplay. Now, the way most people do it is they usually have Kite and Black Rose be the main damage dealers in the party, and then Mistral will take over the magical damage, AoE, and then healing. However, I'm here to tell you guys that Kite is actually the best healer in the game. You are the best healer in the game, mostly because we get to take advantage of healing items, and yes, while you can distribute a bunch of those healing items to the rest of your party, they don't always use them and you can never really command them to use them or rely on them. So anytime you command them to use first aid, there's a good chance they're going to start casting a rep spell. That's not what you want though, because these healing items have 0 animation downtime. And on the opposite side, these rep spells take about 3 seconds to initially cast and then still have some excess time for the animation to complete before they're able to do another command again. It takes up a ton of time between all 4 games, to where the difference in playthroughs is night and day, between whether you rely on your own healing abilities through items or having a Wavemaster in the party specifically to do magic damage and healing. Now, you don't necessarily feel this in the first 2 titles, although there are a couple monsters that would be considered magic tolerant, most importantly the Parasite Dragon at the end of Dot Hack Infection. However, towards the later games, you come across a lot more enemies that are either physical tolerant or magic tolerant in some way. So why am I specifically singling out the Wavemasters in this scenario? Whenever a monster is magic tolerant in particular, sure, you can use a bunch of Beastbane until it eventually hits so that they can be vulnerable to magic damage. However, that's not an efficient or effective way to play the game. Instead, what usually ends up happening is you end up spending a lot of time trying to get the cast to actually land, because it'll miss a couple of times, even if you have 99 magical accuracy, by the way. So you end up wasting a lot of time on that, when instead, if a monster is magically tolerant, you can just go straight into physical damage and attacks with your party members. However, on the other side, when a monster is physically tolerant, you have no issues with the rest of your party using magic damage as well. A lot of that is carried by their gear. You're not particularly worried about the magical attack stats, although they do help, and you do get items that can help with that as well by buffing the party. But more so than anything, you want to focus on elemental weaknesses. That is the very foundation of high DPS in this game. So it becomes this fascinating scenario of the physical damage dealers can still do good magic damage by essentially taking advantage of this elemental weakness system. However, whenever a monster is magically tolerant, your options are either to use Beastbane until it inevitably works, or relegate your Wavemaster to being a healer, which we've already discussed is an inefficient way to use your party. So essentially what you're doing when you bring a Wavemaster in is you're kind of crippling your party in a certain way, especially in the later games. It becomes way more apparent. They end up spending a lot of time sitting in the back waiting for someone to take damage and then taking about 5 seconds to actually cast a heal. Not the literal amount of time, but it feels that long, which is just as bad. So although it may feel counterintuitive initially, the best way to play this game is in a full 3 stack of damage dealers. Now, whichever party member you want to particularly run with is totally up to you. I have a couple preferences. I think Pyros, Sandro, and Gardenia are among the best, especially when it comes to what type of equipment they can wear and what items they can get. And I personally think The heavy blade, heavy axe, and long arm weapons do the most damage all around between elemental and physical. But another point I want to touch on is how people get caught up on the stats of an item. I don't want to say stats are largely irrelevant, but people are using them in the wrong way. People will sacrifice an elemental weakness item just because a different item has about 2 or 3 higher attack damage points. And that's the complete wrong way to go about this. What you really want to do, the real purpose of stats, is to compare and upgrade between similar elemental damage items. So if you have 2 fire blades, the one that has higher stats is the one you keep. It's that simple. However, if you have a fire blade and a thunder blade, you want to keep both of those in your inventory. Ideally, you keep a specific damage type for every single elemental weakness in the game. That is your most effective way to gear not only your character, but your entire party as well. You use the main hand weapons in order to get your physical attacks well-rounded with elemental weaknesses, and then the rest of their gear set can handle all of the magical attacks. Your water, your earth, your wood, your thunder, your darkness, anything you need. I understand it may not sound right off the top, but please just give it a chance. Let me know what you think. I would love to have people try this out on their side and see if it actually does make a difference in their gameplay between how effectively they can get through a dungeon or a boss battle. Maybe this might be the thing helping you with Scathe. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.